Hello everyone, welcome back to the life of Harry Ferguson. Last time we travelled with Harry as he navigated the early days of the Great War, obviously great in regard to size or importance, not positivity. How he was commissioned to help back on the farm by the Irish government in 1917, and remember, he hated farms, to his astonishing Ferguson system invention and his call from America to the estate of the automobile juggernaut Mr. Henry Ford in October 1938. Well, he got a deal done and all was going swimmingly until Mr. Ford retires in 1943. Now, with Ford's grandson in charge, he finds himself in hot water, so to speak. As with all new blood, Ford Jr. wants a complete change. Modernization, if you will. He essentially sweeps the board completely, bringing in a group of data-driven young executives known as the Whiz Kids. Not a name that would inspire much hope in an old-style farmer with a disdain for data and accounts. Very quickly, these new executives pore over the books or accounts, discover the handshake agreement has no legal basis, and, much to Mr. Ferguson's annoyance, at the end of June 1930, they suddenly terminate the agreement. And that's not all. Almost immediately, as in literally in a matter of days, the Ford 8N tractor hits the market. A quick look at this tractor would give anyone pause for thought. And for Harry Ferguson, the last straw has been pulled. Solicitors' letters fly, accusing the Ford company of plagiarism, since there is absolutely no reference to Ferguson in regard to this machine, which would be fine, except, as we already noted, it is so clear that it at least looks like the design created by Harry. For a more definite grounds, because these whiz kids need to be put in their place by legalism, the tractors are undoubtedly using the 3-point hitch and hydraulic system we discussed in a previous episode. A system designed by Harry Ferguson. To call it a brutal betrayal that cut Mr. Ferguson to the bone would be putting things very mildly indeed. However, we have to step out of our time machine for a minute. In all fairness, what happens could truthfully be considered a genius farm boy losing the rag over a handshake with a now deceased aging billionaire that he had presumed to think would mean something in legal terms. The Whiz Kids were trying to save a sinking ship, with the Ford Motor Company bleeding $25 million from manufacturing alone. Back in the time warp, Harry isn't exactly the kind of man to quietly shrink away and accept defeat. He was angry. Really angry. $251 million worth of anger. His claim, patent infringement and antitrust violations. And here again, Mr. Ferguson shows his ability to stamp his name in history. In 1948, Ferguson versus the Ford Motor Company is at the time the biggest lawsuit, not just by an Irishman, not just in the USA, by anyone, ever, like in history. Not bad for a man from County Down. Fighting Irish indeed, eh? Anyhow, from 1948 to 1952, over 10,000 pages of legal testimony are filed. And the craziest part is, for most of it, Henry George Ferguson, known to us mostly as Harry, wasn't even in court. He ran proceedings by conversing with his lawyers from his stone mansion in England. The ending? Of course, it had to be an out-of-court settlement. Not the 250 plus million that Ferguson asked for, but closer to 9 million. Still, not bad for a broken handshake promise. More importantly, from a historical point of view, Mr. Ford is forced by court order to stop using Mr. Ferguson's designs in his tractors. Irish inventor 1, American automobile juggernaut 0. But is $9 million enough to compensate Harry for losing his American manufacturing base? Well, he decides to give it a go. He sets up a plant in Coventry, England, at a place called Banner Lane, and begins to make first of his fully self-made tractors since he became a big shot, the TE20. Now, this isn't just any tractor. Oh no, this would quickly become a global icon. If you know anything about tractors, or more specifically, early tractors, you'll probably have heard of the little grey Fergie. I mean, I don't know a huge pile about them, and even I had heard about this one. So, you know Edmund Hillary? He was the first guy to successfully scale Mount Everest from bottom to top and back again. Well, in 1958, he used a fleet of slightly modified TE-20s to reach the South Pole. That'll tell you how good they were. Picture this guy, this New Zealander, driving an invention by a guy from up and down, again, sorry, I had to, across the frozen bleakness of Antarctica. If that doesn't prove the design's brilliance, nothing does. But that's slightly after 1953. So we'll go back. Because Mr. Ferguson at this point is forced, due to financial difficulties, to merge with the Canadian agricultural giant Massey-Harris. Interesting, slightly random factoid. They couldn't agree on the share price, so what did he do? Well, in true Ferguson style, he literally tosses a coin. Unfortunately for Ferguson, the toss, which he loses, costs him an extra $1 million. Is that the biggest loss in coin toss history? Anyway, that creates Massey-Harris-Ferguson, or as we know it today, Massey-Ferguson. Side note here, I've heard a rumour that Mr. Massey, for a time, lived in Tipperary. If I can verify that, you better believe I'll be doing at least one episode on Mr. Massey. Nothing is ever simple with Mr. Ferguson, and, in another by the way factoid, he initially insists that they keep Ferguson and Massey-Harris tractors' designs separate. Not only that, but even the colours were distinctive. Harry Ferguson kept his grey colour of the little grey Fergie, while Massey-Harris kept their distinctive red colour, and for those who don't know, Massey-Fergusons today are the red tractor. He was really protective, wasn't he? We get now to the Model 50. You'll probably guess what I'm about to say when I start my sentence with Ferguson and the executives. Any guesses? Well, yeah, Ferguson and the executives of Massey-Harris have a huge fallout over the design of the aforementioned Model 50. Essentially, Harry has very strict engineering mathematical rules for stability and weight transfer, and he feels that these rules are being broken in the way the Model 50 is being designed. So, the board manages to overrule him in favour of market trends, and that was just too much for Henry George Ferguson, aka Harry, to take. On the 7th of July 1954, he resigns with immediate effect. You might, if you have a short memory, think that Harry will now just fade off into the oblivion of retirement. But that's not the Harry we know now, is it? He quickly remembers the exhilaration he felt when in the driving seat of racing cars and decides to combine what he has learned from tractor design. He starts focusing on passenger safety. By the mid-1950s, he has founded Harry Ferguson Research Limited to prove that the roads could be as safe as the fields. Harry believes that applying four-wheel drive and anti-lock braking systems, henceforth known as ABS, to everyday cars would do the trick, so to speak. We've already had the Ferguson system, and now we have another self-titled project, the Ferguson Formula. You might take ABS for granted in today's high-tech world, but how was it done in the 1950s? Well, he adapts the system from one of his other loves, aviation. Called the Dunlop Maxarette, his adapted version features a mechanical sensor that could feel through sciencey physics stuff. Listen, I'm a history podcaster, not a physics one. When a wheel is about to stop rotating into the start of a skid, then, when the system senses that a wheel is about to lock, it automatically and momentarily releases the brake pressure on the wheel and then immediately reapplies it. Basically, the system pumps the brakes for the driver dozens of times per second, much faster and more precisely than any human foot could ever manage. Because the wheels keep rotating rather than locking solid, the tyres maintain their grip on the road, and this means that even in a panic, the driver could steer around an obstacle instead of just sliding straight into it. Genius! He proved it worked in the most dramatic and Harry Ferguson style possible. In 1961, he finances a Formula 1 car, known as the P99 racing car. It becomes the only four-wheel drive car to win a Formula 1 race. Ever. And that record still stands. I should say here that his money finances it, as, spoiler alert, he dies on the 25th of October 1960. We'll get to the details later on of his death. There will be a trigger warning, by the way. Anyway, back to the Formula 1 car. Thankfully for the Ferguson legacy, it was a rainy day at Alton Park, and while every other driver was slipping and sliding off the track, Stirling Moss used Ferguson's system to grip the wet road and fly past the competition. The Ferguson system conclusively worked. But look at the irony. This is a man who spent decades of his life trying to make slow-moving tractors perfectly safe so they wouldn't literally get stuck in the mud and flip over. Remember Pancake Dan from our previous episode? Skip forward a few decades, and he uses the exact same knowledge to revolutionize the fastest, most dangerous cars on the planet. Conveniently for a history podcaster like myself, it is a beautifully full-circle moment. However, he can never quite shake his focus on safety, and even after his death, Harry Ferguson is able to pioneer road safety campaigns as his mission is carried forward by his company, Harry Ferguson Research Limited, which he founded in the mid-1950s to develop a super safe family car. Now you may be wondering about production for the ordinary man like you and me. Well, may I suggest researching the Jensen FF from 1966, which becomes the first in the world to use the ABS in a regular production car. Decades before the likes of Subaru and Honda made all-wheel drive as common as mud, the little farm boy from County Down mathematically and practically proves it works. I think you'll agree it's almost hard to believe this sequence of events that we've traced in the last number of episodes belongs to a single person. As we come to a close in his life, here is a few fun, or not so fun, facts. He quickly rejected his strict religious upbringing and was a confirmed and definitive agnostic through his life. He always went to bed, as an adult at least, at 9 p.m. exactly, and always kept a notebook on his nightstand to catch any late-night mechanical ideas. As we reach the final chapter of this restless life, and, trigger warning again, it doesn't end fully peacefully, we find Harry Ferguson far from the clay of County Down or the industrial roar of the Belfast workshops where he first earned his nickname. He was living at Abbotswood, his grand stone mansion tucked away in the peaceful Cotswolds of Gloucestershire. His dedication to his principles over social status was captured when he twice refused a knighthood, stating that such honours were, and I quote, not for businessmen. As with every one of us mere mortals, however, he has to decline at some point. For Harry, his decline begins in earnest in 1957 during a holiday in Jamaica, where the aging inventor is shot in the leg by a burglar. From that point on, his health begins to fail, and the man who had once conquered the Irish sky now finds himself trapped in a cycle of bouts of depression and the relentless grip of insomnia. And in case you didn't realise, here is a major trigger warning. So if you're triggered by the idea of death or sudden death, slightly violent death, possibly self-inflicted, turn it off now. But if you're not, please keep listening because it helps my algorithm. On October 25th, 1960, the man who famously went to bed at 9 p.m. sharp with a pencil and notebook by his side meets the sudden, silent, self-inflicted end. At 76 years old, Henry George Ferguson, known to all as Harry, is found dead in his bath, the victim of an overdose of barbiturates. The inquest was ultimately forced to return an open verdict, as the jury simply could not determine if that final overdose was a tragic accident or a deliberate choice made by a genius who had finally tired of what he had described as the drudgery of this world. Even in his passing, he remained a man of complexity. Following his wishes, his remains were cremated and his ashes scattered over the grounds of his beloved Abbotswood estate. He was survived by his wife Maureen, his most important supporter, and their only daughter. Though he was gone, he left behind a world forever changed by his 3-point hitch and a legacy so enduring that his face and his little grey Fergie still stare back at us from Northern Irish £20 notes today. So there you have it, Harry Ferguson done and dusted. Comment what you like or didn't like about this episode. Follow me at Liam Blake Podcaster on Instagram, and most importantly, tell everyone about the History and Heritage podcast. Goodbye.